All right, rare Friday video on the channel because I completely forgot to upload a video yesterday. Sorry about that. Had some stuff going on in the morning that kind of threw me off kilter for the rest of the day. So yeah, here I am making up for it now, taking a look at Transformers Beast Wars Jetstorm. A neat figure, has some annoying qualities, but it is overall a cool figure. Obviously turns into a little Dragonfly here, and it's a pretty decent mode. I don't know if I would have chosen the black plastic. It's just a little bit boring. Maybe like a dark shade of green would have been a bit more interesting. But, you know, overall, I think it looks good. I do like this kind of like creamy orange that they've used to like pop all the details here. It's like a pinky orange, and I think it looks pretty good. Nice painted detail on the bug eyes there too, with a little bit of like green shading in the middle of the blue. I think does help them pop a little bit there. But yeah, in terms of articulation in this mode, for the top set of wings, they can hinge up and down like this, and then there's also a hinge back and forth like this. And then the bottom set of wings can also hinge back and forth like this, but they are attached to the robot mode arms, so they have a swivel kind of, you know, right below the shoulder and right above the elbow, so you can also use that, similar to kind of how Injector had the swivel for his wings. And sometimes it'll just move the ball joint there too, but you can use the swivel there to hinge these up and down. And then his little bug legs here individually are all on little hinges. These are fairly fragile joints though, and sometimes feel like they're going to crack. A couple of them have cracked, and I've kind of had to glue them back in place. So they're I don't try to move them too much, but they all six do technically have their own range there. And then for the little, you know, mandibles, pincers, whatever you'd call them at the front here, they're each on ball joints, because these will actually end up becoming the robot mode hands, believe it or not. And sometimes these halves of the head like to unpeg here. And then he has a separate mouth kind of underneath here, which is actually just the robot mode head, which is kind of neat. And also ties into one of the features, because if you see here, he's got, I always thought he looked kind of similar to Transketo just in the way that his mouth looks. But in terms of, you know, instead of having like the missile that plugs into the mouth like Transketo does, his is actually a water squirter. So if you this entire section here that has like is, you know, housing this mechanism, and if you take this little green section here and push it forward, that's actually the pump for the water squirter. So basically you'd push that in, stick his head in some water, and then let it fill up, and then you could use that to pump water out of his mouth, which is neat. And then the other gimmick that he has, if you press this little green button back here, is these two missile launchers will flip forward, depending on, you know, how you have the wings positioned, either in between the wings or underneath them. And then they also have these little triggers right here, which you can use to actually activate the missiles to make them shoot out, which are kind of on a hair trigger. So like you saw when I first activated that mechanism, it kind of flipped out and shot the missile all by itself, which is a little bit annoying. And it's also just annoying, you see, like it's kind of hard to get them to actually lock back in place, and then they want to just work themselves back out. And then the other annoying bit is, generally when you're trying to pick up the figure, this is like a really natural place to grab it by. So both the, you know, the missile launchers themselves and also the flipping mechanism are both a little bit sensitive and on a bit of a hair trigger. So it's really easy to kind of activate that accidentally. Also, you know, just from also just pressing the button too. So it can be a little bit annoying to handle this guy, but still I think that that is a neat gimmick overall. But yeah, to get into comparisons in this mode, just for a standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, and for a modern Beast Wars bug, of course, here he is with Kingdom Waspinator, just so you can see what they look like together. To get onto transformation, he's got some kind of neat stuff going on here. First thing you want to do is just unpeg these sections from underneath. These will actually be the robot mode legs, and then you can kind of unclip this whole waist section, and it will just sit on this armature like this for now. You take the two halves of the bug head that are surrounding this robot mode head and unpeg those. They just peg in two places right here, and those will end up being the arms. And then you take this entire body section, which is on its own armature, and you kind of unlock it from here, pulling it down this way, and then it'll flip around like this. And then while you're flipping it around, you kind of want to latch it into the waist piece. So you sort of bring that up and latch these together, and then bring it up the rest of the way till the head plugs in place, which is a really, I don't know, it's a neat mechanism. And then it results in this whole thing kind of sitting off at an angle. This is the whole like big mechanism that's housed within the figure, so they can do the flipping gimmick and the water squirting gimmick. I don't actually know. I guess it's mostly within the tail is where the water is stored, because you can see there's like a little, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's like a little tube that goes from his head down into the back of the figure here. And then to finish off the transformation, we'll just take the legs and rotate them forward and flip out the feet, kind of using this bug leg here that's shaped differently than the others as a heel support, which is kind of neat. You can do whatever you want with these wings. Like you can just bring them up like that. I usually angle them forward so they kind of sit over the shoulders like that. That's the way that I think is the least obtrusive. And then you can rotate the forearms and the hands here. So these got his arms properly facing forward without doing gorilla elbows. And there we have Jetstorm in his robot mode. And yeah, he's got a cool looking robot mode. He's a little bit clunky, but you know, I still think it works overall. And then like, I think you're supposed to kind of take these legs and splay them off to the side. But like I said, the joints on mine are just a little bit iffy, so I don't tend to touch them so much. I tend to just leave them where they are and not mess with them. But you know, yours might be in slightly better condition. But yeah, in terms of articulation, the head does have articulation despite the fact that it's got that tube running back there, but it does mess with it. Like it can hinge up and down a little bit. And then it can technically rotate a little bit on an angle, but it's really not a very large range, so you're not getting a whole lot there. The shoulders are on ball joints, which can rotate around and go out to the side. He's got a thigh swivel right here below the shoulder and above the elbow, like I said before, so you can kind of rotate that however you want, and you could have these bug wings kind of sitting differently depending on how you like it without messing with the elbow articulation there. And then he's got about 90 degrees of bend at the elbow, and then the wrists are on ball joints here. I think probably technically it's supposed to be like this and have the gorilla elbows, but you know, it's got the screws facing forward, which is a little bit ugly, but I much prefer it being able to have like actual elbows. So nothing at the waist, just because of how all that works for transformation. Hips are on ball joints, which can go forward and back and out to the side. It's got a thigh swivel, and these are kind of, you can see there's a bit of cracking there, and I'm trying to like put the right pressure on them when moving them because I don't want it really sitting in like that. But yeah, those are a bit scary. And then the knees are really, really tight, but they do have about a 90 degrees bend of range there. And then the feet can kind of tilt forward and back. So, you know, okay articulation, nothing too crazy. He's a little bit limited in some areas, but, you know, it's kind of serving the gimmick here. Obviously, you can still do the water squirt gimmick since all of that mechanism remains intact. You can still activate this gimmick, but it kind of shoots up at this like weird angle. So I don't. It's more for the you know, the Dragonfly mode than anything else, because they're not really shooting forward at a convincing angle in this mode, but it does still function. And, you know, sometimes more than you'd want it to with the missiles trying to stay in there. It's really like the mechanism for shooting the missiles is much more of on a hair trigger. So sometimes even when it's locked up like this, they'll try to like shoot out and they'll just like sit misaligned, which is a bit annoying, but whatever. And then in terms of comparisons in this mode, here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe for that standard size comparison. And here he is again with Kingdom Waspinator to show him off with a modern bug former there. So you can see, you know, he's a kind of tall deluxe by modern standards, but mostly he's about average. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to Jetstorm. He's an all right figure. He's somewhat limited by the gimmicks that he has, and the gimmicks themselves are, the functionality is a little bit questionable. I mean, the water gimmick I'm sure works fine. I just don't really mess with water gimmicks all that often, but the spring gimmick is, I just wish that the trigger mechanisms were a little bit more solid. And then the only other thing about him is that these the bug legs, since they are like, you know, translucent plastic with this orange overspray, they are a little bit fragile, which is a bit annoying. But you can mostly just leave them in place and not worry about them too much, but it is, always something to consider. But yeah, he's an okay figure overall. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews usually every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Beast Wars Jetstorm.